Hello, folks. I'm Dennis Tucker. I want to invite you to sit down for a few minutes and study along with me. We're going to deal with a subject matter that is a little bit unusual, and that it is one that we're going to talk about humanism. I'm going to talk about humanism in this lesson, and really a number of lessons that's going to be related to this in one way or another. But have you ever maybe gone out on a deck outside your house and it looks really good when you're looking at it from a distance and you walk out there and then realize all of a sudden that it seems like this board right here is squishy and it's soft and then you hear a crack and you realize that board is rotten. It may not appear that way before you stepped out on it, but once you did, you realize that, well, it's weak, that maybe it's just a wear and tear of time and water took care of it, but it's rotten. Or maybe you're inside the house and there's a wall there, you're looking at it and it doesn't, you just kind of realize all of a sudden that paper on that sheetrock doesn't look the same way and as it should, as it used to. And so you go over there, touch it, and you realize that maybe it's really soft back there, and you realize maybe it's termites had gotten in there and actually started eating away at the wall, and that it appears to be okay, but after a while, that destruction, that damage becomes evident. You realize that the basis of the wall, the basis of the wood has been rotten, deteriorated. Well, in a lot of ways, that's the way humanism is, and that we have been a country that has, for many years, valued itself on the idea of religious conviction, religious principles. Our founding fathers, and we talk about the fact of their belief in God, and yet, as you look at it today, we realize that something's different about our country, fundamentally so. And I believe that's because we need the idea of humanism has had a great effect over the years, not just one year, but over year after year after year. And humanism is a ideology. It's a real ideology. Some people may think that, well, you're talking about something that doesn't really exist, but it really does exist, and it's a real element in our society. Many of the battles that goes on today in our courts, in the schools, and even in church buildings, all really deals with the subject of humanism and its teaching and its influence on our culture. Because what happens in the culture eventually happens inside the church. That the church can either affect the culture, or the culture can affect the church. And we have seen, I believe, that the culture has been affecting religious people for a long time. And let me give you some examples I'm talking about. In 1987, there was a case that got a lot of attention because a federal judge basically said he banned 36 textbooks from out of the classroom because it said that it was teaching humanism as religion. Now, humanist advocates, humanist scholars often say that their pulpit today is the classroom, that they see the educational system as their means, their tool in order to spread the doctrine of humanism. And so the judge looked at it and said, well, the humanists have become religion. And then at the same time, we have to realize that they would say, no, 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 we're not religious. But then I got looking in March of 2018. I found this little excerpt here. It said the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of North Carolina has ruled that NCDPS, that is North Carolina Department of Prison Systems, violate both the Establishment and Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution by refusing to recognize humanism as a faith group and by refusing to allow humanists to meet in study groups. And what I found interesting is that humanism is a belief system, it is a faith group. And so when they talk about, well, religion is a faith and therefore it's not allowed, well, humanism also is a faith-based idea. And one can read about various humanist organizations around us. I got a list here: the American Humanist Association, which was founded in 1941. Humanist Institute, which is devoted to developing humanist leaders and publishes a magazine called Humanism Today. North American Committee for Humanism. Aspen Institute for Humanist Studies. The International Humanist and Ethical Union are some of the bigger humanist organizations that exist today. So obviously the organization exists, then the doctrine or the philosophy also exists. And so my point is that humanism is real, and basically it is being taught and it's being promoted and it's being defended. And we need to be aware of what humanism is as religious people. We need to understand what humanism is and its effect on our society. So, first thing is, what is humanism? How is it defined? A dictionary, when I looked it up, says humanism, any system of mode of thought or action which humanist interests, values, and dignity predominate. Sounds pretty benign, doesn't sound pretty reasonable. It goes on, it says a system of thought that rejects religious beliefs and centers on humans and their values, capabilities, and worth. And so, the first part of that sounds pretty good. Humanist interests, values, and dignity predominate. But then it goes on, and that is it rejects the idea of religious values, okay, and centers on humans. Now, let's not be confused with the idea of the study humanities, arts, and literature. That's not what we're talking about here. And let's go ahead, Humanist Dictionary again. It says a believer in principles of humanism. Okay, now what does that really mean? A believer in the principles of humanism. A Protagoras says that man is a measure of all things. Okay, man is all that really matters. That we are it. There's nothing else in the universe except man to direct man's footsteps. Sir Julian Huxley, who's credited being one of the very first humanists, says, I use the word humanist to mean someone who believes that man is just as such a natural phenomenon as an animal or plant. That his body, mind, and soul were not supernaturally created, but are products of evolution. And that he is not under the control or guidance of any supernatural being or beings, but has to rely on himself and on his own power. So we see the connection here between humanism and evolution. And that is, since man is not a created being, so there's no supernatural creation, then the only way to explain man's existence is by the idea of evolution. And that has ramifications, as we're going to see here. Now, in a little bit more study, one of the first real documents to explain humanism is Humanist Manifesto #1, published in 1933. A long time ago, almost 100 years ago when you stop thinking about it. But there, in this Humanist Manifesto, it says some of the following things. It says salvation, based on mere affirmation, still appears as harmful, diverting people with false hopes of heaven hereafter. Reasonable minds must look to other means for survival. Now, what they mean by survival, I don't know. I mean, because we're going to die eventually in this world here. Even if you're humanist or non-humanist, our lifespan here is very limited. Okay, but they're talking about the idea of religion is bad for us because it really gives the illusion of false hope, of something after this life right here. So we need to get beyond that fairy tale, and we need to accept that this is all we have right here now. And it goes on to say, we find insufficient evidence for belief in the existence of a supernatural. It is either meaningless or irrelevant to the question of the survival and fulfillment of the human race. As non-theists, we begin with humans, not God, nature, not deity. Now, to decide it's irrelevant, and to say we don't believe in God, that's really not relevant. If God exists, then that is relevant. Then that destroys the whole concept of what life's about where man came from. It is relevant whether or not God exists or not. Okay, but they say really it doesn't matter. And it goes on to say, no deity will save us. We must save ourselves. Which again, as I read about this idea of salvation and saving ourselves, it is what they mean that we have to save ourselves. What are we saving ourselves from? What are we saving ourselves to do? To, basically. And so it goes on to say there's no evidence, no credible evidence that life survives the death of the body. So they take it from the point of view of, okay, we're just like any other animal out there. We're like Rover, dead all over. Once we die, that's it. Okay, there's nothing beyond this life here and now. No, man does not have a soul. There's no such thing as heaven, no such thing as day of judgment, no such thing as heaven or hell. Okay, that's their idea. Express Humanist Manifesto #1. Humanist Manifesto #2. Now, that was print in 1973. So, almost 50 years ago now. Okay. And so, here's some of the statements out of that. It says, as in 1933, humanists still believe that traditional theism being belief in God, especially faith and the prayer of hearing God, assume to live and care for persons, to hear and understand their prayers, and to be able to do something about them is unproven and outmoded faith. So they again double down on this idea that a prayer to God, this idea of a benevolent being, a superior individual out there that's omnipotent, that's all powerful, that will listen and hear our prayers, that is, as they say, simply unproven, outmoded. Okay, we've grown beyond that. It's kind of what they're saying here. They go ahead and say salvationism, based on mere affirmation, still appears as harmful, diverting people with false hopes of heaven hereafter. So not only is it, not the best thing to do, it is actually bad for us to actually think about heaven or to think about, because we're giving people a false hope of something after this life over. Now again, does it really matter then? By humanism, if we die and that's it, does it really matter whether or not I believe in God or not? Well, they would say yes, because that's diverting us from, I guess, more energy in trying to make this life better. That's what they would say. And however, the next statement said the next century. Now, this was written in 1973, so the next century is this time now. The next century can and should be the humanist century. And I believe that's really what they, true in the sense that they are using time and, again, the effects of years after year after year of indoctrination, of promoting their doctrine, and of controlling maybe government, society, institutions, of society in general, that this is kind of turning into the humanist century as far as promoting their doctrine and belief system. And it goes on to say, using technology wisely, we can control our environment, conquer poverty. Now, again, keep in what their mind, control our environment. Okay, have we heard a lot about climate change? Sure we have. Okay, control our environment, conquer poverty. What's one of the big things today? We don't want anybody being poor. Now, I'm not saying, the being poor and helping poor people is wrong, but keep in mind, the Bible says you're always going to have poor people with you. Well, they want to conquer poverty, markedly reduce disease. Again, nothing wrong with the idea of trying to help people be healthy. Extend our lifespan, all in favor of extending my life, of being healthy, and provide humankind with unparalleled opportunity for achieving an abundant and meaningful life. Now, these sounds like good goals, but again, you kind of come to about the point that I keep on thinking about when I read this, and that is, how do I define the idea of abundant, meaningful life? What meaningful and how? Okay, well, they're going to talk about that a little more in a few minutes, but they also say false theologies of hope, this idea of heaven, and messianic ideologies about Christ and about the Son of God come here. They said that's all mythology. That's simply like the fairy tales of the Romans and Greeks. Substituting new dogmas for old cannot cope with existing world realities. So that's some of what they're defining here as it caused man to divert his interest from what needs to be done to the idea of religion and the belief in God. And they said that these things are making we're not dealing with reality. Humanism can provide the purpose and inspiration that so many seek. It can give personal meaning and significance to human life. Now, they don't really explain that in the sense of, okay, if I die and that's it, and right now is all we have, then really, what is the meaning of life? What is our purpose in life? We are just like the cows and the dogs and the sheep out in the pasture. And that is, there's really not a grand scheme of the purpose of life, is there? Now, religion, now this kind of focuses on this here, an idea of religion. Again, it says, we find insufficient evidence for belief in the existence of a supernatural is either meaningless or irrelevant to the question of survival and fulfillment of the human race. As non-theists, we begin with humans, not God, nature, not deity. So they're admitting here that we just automatically cancel out the idea of God. We look at everything simply from a naturalistic, physical point of view. And it goes on and it says, okay, we already decided God does not exist. If you do believe in God, you have taken out the ball, you are doing something bad. And so we appreciate the need to preserve the best ethical teachings and the religious traditions of humankind, many of which we share in common. Now, let me stop right there for a second. I realize this was written in 1973. And perhaps in 1973, that was true. A lot of the morality and morals of humanism coincided, for the most part, with religion. The idea again of you start to think about things that were accepted in 1973, such as the idea of sanctity in marriage, the idea of do not lie, do not kill, do not steal. Those kind of things were, accepted by the humanists because, society generally accepted that, and religion taught that. Shared common beliefs. Now, is that really true today? I believe today there's a lot of those beliefs are no longer shared by humanists. They drifted to the point that a lot of those ideas that used to be accepted as a common basis between religion and humanism is gone. But it says, but we reject those features of traditional religious morality that deny humans a full appreciation of their own personalities or potentialities and responsibilities. So that's the point here. And that is the thing about religion that says I shouldn't do something is wrong. The thing that because it limits my potential. And you can read in that the idea of the homosexual marriages, the idea of maybe other things that the religion says I need to do. They said no, that's all wrong. And it goes on and says, too often traditional faiths encourage dependence rather than independence, obedience rather than affirmation, fear rather than courage. Now, let me give a little bit of a shout out here to humanism in the sense that when they talk about traditional faiths, when one thinks about the doctrine of Calvinism and the tenets of Calvinism and the idea that God is responsible for everything I do and that I really can't make choices of my own, that God's sinful by very nature. When I read those kind of things, I can see where humanists look at that and say, that kind of religion is bad because it takes away my individual responsibilities. And really, that we have to understand where they're coming from when they look at religion. And they see a lot of the bad things religion does teach, and a false religion, not of the Bible, but false religion teaches. And so it says, no deity will save us. We must save ourselves. Now, again, from what? And to what? How do we save ourselves? And from what are we saving ourselves? It goes on and says, promises of immortal salvation or fear of eternal damnation are both illusory and harmful. It makes me feel bad about myself. It makes me fearful about the idea of going to hell, especially because hell doesn't exist. I don't need to worry about that. And so finally ends, there's no credible evidence that life survives death of the body. And so those are as far as how humanism relates to religion, how it views religion. And so the principles of humanism, secular humanism, one is the focuses on man. That we are the totality of everything there is, okay? Forget about God. He doesn't exist. Throw him away. Man is all there is. The second thing then is a rejection of anything that's spiritual. Anything that we think of that's not physical in nature. If you can't measure in the lab, if you can't touch it, touch it, feel it, literally feel it with your fingers, then it does not exist. Rejects anything spiritual. Again, claims of a higher level of thinking, of understanding and morality, that doesn't exist. The claims of something being more intelligent than we are, of greater understanding than us, of morality, and how do you define morality? Again. And then finally, naturalism. Then here's what, to quote them, humanists as philosophy says, humanism believes in naturalistic cosmology or metaphysics of attitude toward the universe that rules out all forms of the supernatural and that regards nature as a totality of being and as a constantly changing system of events which exist independently of any mind or consciousness. So basically nature, how nature functions, where nature comes from, all that, again, is just a given by their philosophy. And again, that everything is by time and chance. Now, some scientists actually have a problem with this. Even some humanists have a problem with some of this because when they look at the universe, they see, if not God, some kind of intelligent design involved in it. But this explains where they're coming from. And so let's look at this, talk about it. Focus of these, extend the principle of it. The goal of human life is, okay, and when we focus on man, what is the goal of human life? That's what I talk about. We can reach our potential. Well, it's self-fulfillment. Okay, what does that really mean? I can be the best I can. And how to define that, I don't know. Gratification. What makes me feel good? That's good. That's good enough. Do what makes you feel good. Do what makes you happy. Don't worry about anything else. And improve society or culture. That's what they're talking about, what their aim is. So we want to make this place better. We want to make our culture better. How that happens, we have had now, since 1933, Humanist Manifesto, almost 100 years, 91, almost, about 90 years of humanism. Are we really a better culture? And freedom from God and all absolutes, so as to be able to free you to do good. Now, getting rid of God then is really what allows you to do good. That's what their focus is. Second, end poverty. Now, the way to do is they use governments to spread the wealth. It's connected to the idea of communism, of socialism, all those kind of things together. Karl Marx and his points about communism. Point number 11 said that, basically, it's quoted in Humanist Manifesto, and the reason says, if unable, then society should provide means to satisfy the basic economic, health, and cultural needs, including whatever resources make possible, and a minimum guaranteed annual income. Are we starting to hear more of that? Of a guaranteed annual income? That's what we're moving towards. But the idea is the government is going to make us as a society by taking and giving. Okay, that's a part of humanism. And also said, well, all should not seek to encourage morality, but to allow mankind to be better. How many times we heard the phrase, you can't legislate morality, but yet in their laws, they are advocating actually immoral conduct. And so laws should not be to encourage morality, what they say. Again, kind of wonder how they interpret that as far as, isn't murder a moral question? Isn't the idea of abortion a moral question? So many things are morals. Okay. A third thing is create world peace and unity. We're going to make this flash here a whole lot better. And basically, they say, we deplore the division of humankind on naturalistic grounds. So the idea of nations, for instance. We deplore that whole idea that we are all human. And it goes on and says, we thus reaffirm a commitment to the building of world community. At the same time, recognizing this commits us to some hard choices. They don't really say what all the hard choices is, but they say we should view this not as, again, nations, but as all mankind being the same. And that we have to do away with our, I guess you call it, our naturalistic tendencies, as they say. And then also the Bible, though. Now the Bible starts with God and not man. And this is the part here. I know up to this point I really hadn't talked about the Bible hardly, but let's end this here, really talk more about the Bible. And the Bible starts with man. It starts with God and not man. In Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13 and 14. Bless your inclusion in the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. Now, see how that contradicts humanism? That man is here to fear God and keep his commandments, and that everything we do will be brought into judgment. Now, the rejection of spiritual is because nothing that, spiritual can't be measured or cannot be seen in the lab. And so they say man must save himself. Now again, what does man save himself from? If man is simply a natural process, simply a natural process of evolution, and just another animal, there's nothing to be saved. There's nothing at all to be saved. Well, the Bible refers to man's spiritual being, that we are made in the image of God in Genesis 1, verse 26. That man possesses a soul. In Ecclesiastes, now Solomon looks at life in Ecclesiastes, really from a humanistic point of view, and basically says, okay, let's take God out of the picture. And what Solomon in conclusion is, when you do that, then basically there's nothing, in life. Everything is lacking. In Ecclesiastes 3rd chapter, verse 18 through verse 22, he says, I said in my heart concerning the condition of the sons of men, God tests them, that they may see that they themselves are like animals. For what happens to the sons of men also happens to animals. One thing befalls them, as one dies, so does the other. Surely they all have one breath. Man has no advantage over animals, for all is vanity. From the human point of view, from the physical, materialistic point of view, we're not any different than the animals. We all live, we all breathe, we all die. All go to one place. All go to the grave. All go back to dust. All are from the dust, and all return to the dust. He knows the spirit of the sons of men, which goes upward, and the spirit of the animal, which goes down to the earth. So perceive that nothing is better than that man should rejoice in his own works, for that is his heritage. For who can bring him to see what will happen after him? And that is, okay, let's take man from a humanist point of view. We're like the dogs, we die. We don't know what's going to happen after us. That there, as far as our consciousness, as far as our existence, it ends right there. We're not any different than the animals. Now, Psalms 103, verse 14 through verse 18, kind of paints a little different picture. It says, for he knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust, that we do die and we go back to the earth. As for men's, his days are like grass of the fire of the field, so he flourishes. For the wind passes over it and is gone, and its place remembers it no more. But the mercy of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting on those who fear him. And his righteousness to children's children, to such as keep his commandment, and those who remember his commandments to do them. There is a different picture here in Psalms 103, verse 4, verse 14 through verse 20 through 18 here, and that God sees that we are more than the animals, that we are to do his commandments. Now, a higher level of understanding and thinking. Again, humanism ridicules anything that is considered sacred. And in Romans 1, verse 22, it says that professing wise became fools. Now, to show you how ridiculous some of this can get, just this last week, I think it was, maybe 2 weeks ago now, in Supreme Court hearings, as far as the new judge or the person being nominated to be the next Supreme Court judge, the question was asked about define a woman. What is woman? And the judge says, I don't know. I'm not a biologist. I don't know. Okay, now, I'm not a biologist. I had a little bit of science in high school, a little bit of science maybe even before that. And there's this thing called XY chromosomes, and depending on your combination X and Y, you're either male or female. You don't have to be a biologist to know that. But it just kind of shows you how convoluted things can get as far as professing wives becoming fools. Why did that lady say, I don't know? Because she did not want to say, okay, there's such a thing as a man and a woman. That's why and the Bible, because the Bible teaches that. The only thing that's sacred in humanism, and the one thing that cannot be tolerated in humanism, is religion. And in particular, Christianity cannot be tolerated. The concept of sin, evil, between evil and sin is bad because it makes you feel guilty. The reason some accept humanism, by the way, is because it allows them to do whatever they want to do. And, without any consequences, which is pretty easy argument for me to accept that that's what I want to accept. And so they say the Bible is simply superstition. It's simply myths and fables, and people that accept the Bible are afraid to think for themselves. They are weak-minded individuals, is the way humanists look at it. And rationalism replaces right and wrong. Whatever we think is best is okay. Psalms 14, verse 1 said, the fool says, heart, there is no God. The fool there is not talking about a person that doesn't have intelligence, but talking about a morally foolish person. They advocate then the destruction of the Bible. We'd better off get rid of it. Now let's understand this. The Bible invites investigation and not superstition. Isaiah 1 verse 18 says, "Come now, let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they shall be as wool." Let us reason together, says the Lord. 2 Timothy 2 verse 15 says to present yourself approved to God. Be diligent to present yourself approved to God's workers, not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Other translation says, handling accurately the word of God. Study to show thyself approved. So the Bible says we need to study to see what it says, to rightly divide it. And so, as you look at this, naturalism or scientific humanism, again, is evolution based. That's the basic tenet of this philosophy. It has to be based on evolution. Everything came from nothing. Order came from disorder. Life came from non-living matter. Reason came from that which is irrational. Personality came from that which is non-personal. Morality comes from that which is amoral. Doesn't matter. And all the information, all the facts are to be interpreted through the scope of naturalism. It's what humanism is all about. It reminds me of a story of a man that had a net, and the net was designed to catch fish that's only 2 inches or bigger. And his conclusion is that there's not any fish in the sea that's smaller than 2 inches, because that his net only catches fish that are 2 inches and bigger. Well, obviously, he's wrong. Evolution, humanism interprets everything in that scope, though, the same way. And science is their God. Science becomes their God. They refuse to see the force behind nature. In Hebrews 11 verse 3 says, by faith we understand the worlds were framed by the word of God. In Hebrews 3 verse 4, it says we understand that the maker of a house, every house is built by someone. Okay, every house has a builder. The universe has a builder. Man has a builder. And the Bible teaches us that we all came from God. Now, there's nothing new under the sun. Again, Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 1 verse 9, humanism is a remodeled or a rehashed philosophy that's existed before we called it humanism. But we must seek the truth and be willing to look at the Bible and understand and interpret it and look for the facts the Bible teaches, and just think about which one makes more sense. What does the Bible say? And that would give us a lot of answers. Not ignore what the Bible, but instead look at the Bible. And it's up to us to have open hearts to seek to do what God says do. If you're somebody that's rejected the idea of God, or maybe you know somebody that has, sit down with them. Maybe sit down with your Bible. Sit down and try to read it logically and see which one makes more sense: humanism and evolution, or the Bible. If I can aid you in that study, won't you let me know? I do appreciate you watching, and if you can, come be with us. I preach at Lilac Road, Church of Christ, Litchfield, Kentucky. Our building is located at 1687 Lilac Road. Our time of services on Sunday mornings, we have Bible classes at 9:30, worship at 10:25, and then worship on Sunday evenings at 5 p.m. On Wednesday night, it is, well, we're actually changing it to 6 p.m. It's been normally 7 p.m., but we're changing it to 6 p.m. That will be starting this Wednesday night, the first Wednesday in April. If you can, come be with us. Feel free to hit the like button to share this, or to contact me if you have any comments. Be glad to hear from you. I appreciate you watching and studying along with me.